Rain hammered the windshield like bullets as Daniel Mackenzie squinted through the downpour, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The storm had come out of nowhere, turning the evening commute into a nightmare. Through the sheets of water, something caught his eye. Red and blue lights flashing weakly on the shoulder of the highway. A police cruiser sat motionless, hazards barely visible through the deluge. Hey there, Soul Tales family. Welcome back to another incredible story about fate, second chances, and the moments that change everything. Before we dive deep into Daniel's story, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss the journey we're about to take together. Trust me on this one. Daniel's first instinct was to keep driving. He was already late picking up his daughter from after-school care, and the storm was getting worse by the second. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the construction worker in him, always ready to help, or maybe it was something deeper, something he couldn't name yet. He pulled his truck onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of the cruiser, grabbed the umbrella from his back seat, and stepped into the storm. The rain soaked through his jeans immediately, cold and unforgiving. He jogged toward the police car, raising his voice above the roar of the storm. "Everything okay, officer?" The figure inside the cruiser turned, and when she stepped out of the vehicle, Daniel's world tilted on its axis. The umbrella nearly slipped from his grasp. His breath caught in his throat. Time didn't just slow, it stopped completely. Those eyes, that face, the curve of her jaw, the way rainwater streamed down her cheeks. He knew every detail like he knew his own reflection. Melissa. The name tore from his lips, barely more than a whisper, swallowed by thunder. The officer's professional composure cracked. Her eyes went wide, disbelief flooding her features as water poured down her face, making it impossible to tell if tears had joined the rain. "Daniel Mackenzie?" Her voice trembled. "Oh my God, is that really you?" Melissa Travin, his college sweetheart, his fiancée. The woman who had shattered his heart into 1,000 pieces just 3 weeks before their wedding, claiming she wasn't ready for commitment, that she needed to find herself. That marriage felt like a cage closing in. The breakup had nearly destroyed him. It took years to feel whole again, years to trust anyone with even a fraction of his heart. And now here she stood, in a police uniform, stranded in the rain, staring at him like she'd seen a ghost. What brought Melissa back to this town after all these years? And why did fate choose this moment, this storm, this exact stretch of highway, to throw them back together? "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked, instinctively moving closer to shield Melissa from the rain with his umbrella. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Last I heard, you were living your dream in California." Melissa's laugh held no humor, just bitter irony. Dreams don't always turn out the way you expect them to. She gestured helplessly at her cruiser. "I moved back about 2 years ago, joined the police academy, became a cop, and now I'm stuck in this monsoon with a dead battery." Daniel's construction worker instincts kicked in immediately, overriding the chaos in his mind. "Let me take a look. I've got jumper cables in my truck." As he worked under the hood, connecting cables with practiced efficiency, they exchanged careful fragments of their lives. Melissa had chased her modeling dreams to Los Angeles, the bright lights, the promises of stardom. But the industry had chewed her up and spit her out. After years of rejection, barely scraping by on waitressing jobs between failed auditions, she found herself empty and alone. Law enforcement had given her purpose, a way to help people instead of just chasing vanity. "And you?" Melissa asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. "You stayed here?" Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. "I got married to Jennifer. We have a daughter together, Emma. She's 8. He paused, the next words harder to say. "We're divorced now, have been for 2 years. Something flickered across Melissa's face. Regret, sympathy, something deeper. "I'm sorry things didn't work out." "Don't be," Daniel replied, connecting the final cable. "Emma is the best thing that ever happened to me. Being her dad, it saved me when I thought I'd never feel whole again." The cruiser's engine roared to life, and Melissa's face lit up with genuine relief. "You always were good with your hands," she said, then immediately blushed at the unintended implication. Daniel felt something stir in his chest. old hurt mixing with new curiosity, creating a dangerous cocktail of emotions he wasn't ready to name. Just glad I could help, officer. What should have been goodbye turned into something else. Melissa pulled out her phone, water dripping onto the screen. Would it be okay to give you my number? Just in case of emergencies. Daniel knew it was a lie. They both did. But he took his phone out anyway and saved her number, telling himself it meant nothing, even as his pulse quickened. Neither of them believed the just in case. 3 days passed. 3 days where Daniel tried not to think about Melissa's face in the rain, the way she looked at him, the thousand unspoken words hanging between them. He was helping Emma with her math homework when his phone rang, and his heart did something stupid when he saw her name on the screen. Officer Travin, he answered, keeping his tone light and teasing. Is this an emergency? Her laugh came through the line like sunshine breaking through clouds, bright, familiar, and dangerous. Actually, it's more of a thank you. I was wondering if you might like to grab coffee sometime. My treat for saving me from drowning in that storm. Daniel hesitated. Dating hadn't even been on his radar since the divorce. The thought of opening himself up again, especially to the woman who demolished him a decade ago, made his chest tighten with old panic. It's just coffee, Daniel, Melissa added gently, reading his silence perfectly. No pressure. I'd just like to catch up properly. Hear about Emma, about your life. That's all. Something in her voice, the patience, the understanding, the absence of expectation, made him say yes. That Saturday, they met at a small cafe downtown. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. Old wounds sat at the table between them like unwanted guests, making the conversation stilted and awkward. Daniel ordered black coffee. Melissa got a latte with extra foam, just like she used to in college, and the familiarity of it twisted something in his gut. But then Melissa told a story about her first week as a cop, when she accidentally locked herself in her own patrol car, and Daniel found himself laughing for the first time in months. The ice began to crack. I've thought about you over the years, Melissa admitted, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. I wondered if I made the biggest mistake of my life, walking away from you. Daniel looked at her thoughtfully, measuring his words. At the time, it felt like the end of the world. I was angry for years, if I'm being honest. But looking back, maybe we both needed to grow up separately before we could be ready for anything real. And now? She asked, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. Now I'm a dad first, Daniel said firmly. Everything else comes second. Emma's been through enough with the divorce. I can't bring someone into her life unless I'm absolutely certain. Melissa nodded slowly. I'd like to meet her sometime. Your daughter, if you'd let me. The request should have scared him. Instead, it felt strangely right. If you're loving this story so far, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me if you believe in second chances. Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past? I want to hear your stories. The coffee date turned into dinner the following weekend. Then a movie. Then a hiking trip where Daniel found himself talking about Emma, her obsession with dinosaurs, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she held his hand through the entire divorce and told him it would be okay. Melissa listened with her full attention, asking questions that showed she genuinely cared. She didn't try to insert herself into the narrative or compete with Emma's mother. She just listened. And something about that made Daniel's carefully constructed walls start to crumble. Text messages became a daily ritual. Good morning messages, photos of interesting things they saw during the day, silly memes that made them laugh. Daniel found himself reaching for his phone during lunch breaks, smiling at Melissa's observations about the absurdity of small-town crime, stolen garden gnomes, disputes over property lines, teenagers toilet papering the mayor's house. Melissa started dropping by Daniel's construction sites during her patrol, bringing coffee and staying for quick conversations that somehow always lasted longer than either of them planned. His crew noticed, making knowing comments that Daniel brushed off with rolled eyes and denial that fooled no one. But beneath the growing connection, fear lurked in Daniel's chest like a coiled snake. Late at night, after Emma was asleep, he'd lie awake remembering the devastation of losing Melissa the first time. The weeks after she left, when he could barely function, when getting out of bed felt impossible, when he'd questioned everything about himself. Could he risk that kind of pain again? Would it be fair to Emma to bring someone into their carefully rebuilt life who might leave when things got hard? The questions haunted him, but not enough to make him stop answering Melissa's calls. 2 months after the rainy reunion, Melissa came over for dinner. She and Emma had met briefly once before, a quick introduction at an ice cream shop. But this was different. This was Melissa in their home, in their space, becoming part of their routine. They cooked together in the kitchen, Melissa's laughter filling the house as Emma told elaborate stories about her third-grade teacher who apparently had once been a spy. Daniel watched them from the corner of his eye, his heart doing dangerous things in his chest. Emma took to Melissa immediately, fascinated by her police badge and delighted when Melissa taught her the phonetic alphabet. E is for echo, Emma repeated seriously. M is for Mike. M-A is for, Mike Alpha, Melissa supplied with a grin. You're a natural, kiddo. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Melissa sat on the porch swing, a comfortable silence settling between them as they watched fireflies dance in the darkness. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. I should tell you something, Melissa said finally, her voice quiet and careful. I've never stopped regretting what I did to you. Daniel turned to look at her profile in the dim porch light, the shadows playing across her face. It was a long time ago, Melissa. Not long enough to forget, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was young and scared and thought I needed to see the world, experience everything before settling down. But nothing I found out there, none of the experiences, none of the people, compared to what I left behind, to whom I left behind. Daniel was silent for a long moment, processing her words while his heart pounded against his ribs. I can't go back to who I was then, he finally said. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. Melissa nodded, starting to withdraw emotionally, preparing herself for the rejection she'd carry as a deserved punishment for 10 years. But Daniel continued, reaching for her hand and threading their fingers together. Maybe we don't need to go back. Maybe we could see who we might be now. Take it slow for Emma's sake. He paused, squeezing her hand. And for mine. Melissa's eyes glistened in the moonlight, tears threatening to spill over. I'd like that very much. I'd like that more than anything. The conversation marked a turning point. Daniel began consciously letting go of old hurts, allowing himself to embrace the possibility of a second chance while still protecting his heart and his daughters. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As the weeks passed, Melissa became woven into the fabric of their lives. She helped Emma with her science project on volcanoes, getting just as excited as the 8-year-old when the baking soda eruption worked perfectly. She taught Emma basic self-defense moves that made the girl giggle with delight. Remember, knees and elbows are your best friends. She even attended Emma's school play, sitting beside Daniel with genuine pride as Emma delivered her 2 lines as tree number 3 with dramatic flair. For Daniel, watching Melissa with his daughter awakened feelings he thought were buried and gone forever. She was patient and kind, never trying to replace Emma's mother or overstep boundaries. Instead, she carved out her own unique relationship with the girl, somewhere between a friend, a mentor, and something deeper that neither of them had named yet. But not everyone was thrilled about their rekindled relationship. Daniel's ex-wife Jennifer, who had moved back to town 6 months ago after her new relationship imploded, suddenly seemed very interested in spending more time with Emma, and with Daniel. Her timing struck him as suspicious, like a predator sensing vulnerability. "So you're dating the cop who gave me a speeding ticket last month," Jennifer said during one pickup, her tone deceptively casual as she handed over Emma's backpack. "Small world, isn't it?" Daniel raised an eyebrow, keeping his expression neutral. "Melissa gave you a ticket? She didn't mention it." Jennifer's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Interesting that she wouldn't tell you something like that. Makes you wonder what else she's keeping from you, doesn't it?" The seed of doubt was planted with surgical precision, and Jennifer knew it. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel asked Melissa about the ticket. His voice was careful, trying not to sound accusatory, but the question hung between them like a challenge. Yes, I gave her a ticket, Melissa admitted without hesitation, meeting his eyes directly. She was doing 50 in a school zone. I didn't realize she was your ex until I saw the last name on her license. By then, I had already written the citation. Why didn't you tell me? Melissa's gaze never wavered. Because it had nothing to do with you or us. I was doing my job, Daniel. She broke the law in a zone meant to protect children. Should I have given her special treatment because she's your ex-wife? Her honesty and directness reassured him, but Jennifer's interference had just begun. She started manufacturing emergencies, calling Daniel for help with things that turned out to be minor inconveniences she could have easily handled herself. She scheduled last-minute activities with Emma that deliberately conflicted with plans Daniel had made with Melissa. She made pointed comments to Emma about how relationships don't always last, and sometimes mommies and daddies get back together. The situation exploded at Emma's 9th birthday party. Daniel had invited Melissa, who had been looking forward to it for weeks. But Jennifer showed up unannounced with an extravagant gift, an expensive bicycle that made Daniel's present look pathetic by comparison, and immediately monopolized Emma's attention, hovering around her daughter like a possessive shadow. When Melissa offered to leave to avoid causing tension, Emma grabbed her hand with surprising fierceness. "Don't go," the 9-year-old pleaded, her voice trembling. "I want you here. I invited you." The simple declaration silenced every adult in the backyard. Jennifer's face tightened, her jaw clenching, but she said nothing more. The other parents exchanged uncomfortable glances and suddenly became very interested in their cake. After the party, as Daniel and Melissa cleaned up discarded paper plates and deflated balloons, he found himself watching her with new clarity. She handled Jennifer's petty provocations with grace, never rising to the bait, always putting Emma's feelings first. "I'm sorry about Jennifer," he said quietly, tying off a garbage bag. "She's been difficult lately. Actually, she's been impossible." Melissa shrugged, though Daniel could see the strain around her eyes. "She's Emma's mother. She'll always be part of your life, and I accept that." "Yes, but you're becoming part of our lives too," Daniel said, the words coming out more intense than he intended. "An important part." Melissa set down the garbage bag she was holding and turned to face him fully, her expression suddenly vulnerable. "What are you asking me, Daniel?" He took a deep breath, knowing this moment mattered, that what he said next would define everything. "I'm asking if you're in this for the long haul, because Emma's getting attached to you." He paused, his voice dropping. "And so am I. And I need to know if you're going to stay, or if one day you're going to wake up and decide you need something else again." Melissa's eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to hide. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "Not this time. Not ever again, if you'll have me. I ran away once because I was scared of commitment, scared of losing myself. But I lost everything that mattered anyway. I won't make that mistake twice." She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "I love you, Daniel. I love Emma. You too, this is what I should have chosen 10 years ago. This is what I'm choosing now, every single day. I'm all in." The revelation hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as years of pain and doubt finally began to dissolve. "I love you too," he whispered into her hair. "God help me. I never stopped." Their relationship deepened after that night, becoming something solid and real. Melissa began staying over occasionally after Emma was asleep, and mornings would find the three of them making pancakes together, laughing over burnt edges and lopsided shapes. They developed comfortable routines: Sunday brunches at the diner, movie nights with Emma choosing increasingly terrible animated films, weekend hikes where Emma would race ahead and Melissa would slip her hand into Daniel's. Daniel found himself thinking of them as a family, though he kept these thoughts private, not wanting to jinx the fragile happiness they built. 6 months after their rainy roadside reunion, Daniel knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to marry Melissa. But before he could plan anything, their worlds shattered. It started with a routine traffic stop that went horribly wrong. Melissa pulled over a vehicle for a broken taillight, standard procedure, nothing unusual. But the driver was wanted on felony warrants, desperate and armed. When Melissa approached the window, he fired 3 shots. 2 missed. 1 didn't. Daniel got the call while he was picking Emma up from school. A detective from Melissa's precinct, voice carefully controlled, professional sympathy dripping from every word. Officer Travin has been involved in a shooting. She's been transported to Memorial Hospital. She's alive, but you should come now. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Daniel's life. Emma sat in the back seat, crying softly, asking questions he couldn't answer because his throat was too tight with terror. Melissa was in surgery for 6 hours. The bullet had entered her abdomen, missing major arteries by millimeters. When the surgeon finally emerged, exhausted and still in blood-stained scrubs, the prognosis was cautiously optimistic. She's stable, lucky, a few centimeters to the left, and we are having a very different conversation. But luck felt like a cruel word when Daniel finally saw her in the ICU, pale and unconscious, machines beeping rhythmically around her. He sat by her bed, holding her hand, Emma curled up in a chair beside him, and faced the terrifying reality of how quickly everything could be taken away. When Melissa finally woke up 2 days later, groggy and in pain, the first thing she saw was Daniel's haggard face. He hadn't left the hospital except to take Emma home and make sure she was cared for. "Hey," she whispered, her voice rough from the breathing tube. "Hey, yourself," he managed, tears streaming down his face. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry," she said with a weak smile. "Occupational hazard." But as the days passed and Melissa began the slow process of recovery, something shifted. The shooting had triggered something in Daniel, a deep, primal fear he couldn't control. Every time Melissa talked about returning to work, his chest tightened with panic. "Maybe you could consider a desk job," he suggested carefully during one visit, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Detective work, something safer." Melissa's expression hardened. "Being a cop is who I am, Daniel. It's not just a job, it's my purpose. I can't give that up." "Even if it kills you? Even if it destroys Emma? Do you know what it would do to her to lose you?" "That's not fair," Melissa said, her voice sharp despite her weakness. "You don't get to use Emma as leverage." The argument escalated, both of them speaking from fear and trauma rather than reason. Daniel couldn't articulate that his terror came from loving her so deeply that the thought of losing her was unbearable. Melissa couldn't make him understand that asking her to give up being a cop was asking her to give up a fundamental part of herself. "Maybe this was a mistake," Daniel said finally, the words coming out harsh and desperate. "Maybe I can't do this, can't spend every day wondering if you're coming home." Melissa's face went pale, and this time it wasn't from blood loss. "Are you breaking up with me? While I'm lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound?" "I don't know," he admitted, hating himself. "I just know I can't breathe thinking about you out there. I can't function. Emma asked me yesterday if you were going to die, and I didn't know what to tell her." "So your solution is to leave before life gets hard?" Melissa's voice was cold now, defensive walls slamming into place. "That's rich, coming from the man who was so worried I'd run away again." Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against linoleum. "I need some air." He left before she could respond, before he could see the tears sliding down her cheeks. For the next week, Daniel stayed away from the hospital, telling himself he needed space to think. Jennifer, sensing an opportunity like a shark smelling blood, increased her presence in Emma's life, making sympathetic noises about how some people just aren't cut out for difficult situations. Emma, caught in the middle, became withdrawn and quiet. She asked repeatedly to visit Melissa, but Daniel made excuses, unable to face the woman he loved while drowning in his own fear and cowardice. Melissa was discharged from the hospital to an empty apartment, her heart more damaged than her body had ever been. It was Emma who finally broke through Daniel's paralysis. 10 days after the shooting, she came into the living room where Daniel sat staring blankly at a muted television. Her face was set with a determination that reminded him painfully of Melissa. "I want to see Melissa," she announced, "and you can't stop me." "Emma." "No, Dad. You don't get to decide this." Emma's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "She got hurt protecting people. That's what heroes do, and you're acting like she did something wrong." "It's complicated, sweetheart." "It's not complicated." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You're scared. I get it. I'm scared too. When I heard she got shot, I thought I was going to throw up. But being scared doesn't mean you get to leave people when they need you most. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes came the truth he was avoiding. Mom left you, Emma continued, her voice softening, and Melissa left you a long time ago, and you're so afraid everyone's going to leave that you're leaving first. But that's not how love works, Dad. You taught me that. Daniel stared at his 9-year-old daughter, seeing wisdom far beyond her years. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Emma said with a watery smile. You just don't always listen. That afternoon, Daniel drove to Melissa's apartment, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He texted ahead, asking if he could come over. Her response had been a single word, okay. She answered the door in sweats and an old police academy t-shirt, still moving carefully to protect her healing wound. Her face was guarded, prepared for more pain. I'm sorry, Daniel said immediately. I'm so sorry. I was a coward, and I hurt you when you needed me most, and there's no excuse for that. Melissa's expression didn't soften. You left me alone in a hospital bed. You disappeared when I was terrified and in pain. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I know, and I hate myself for it. Daniel stepped closer, careful not to invade her space. The shooting triggered something in me, this overwhelming terror that I was going to lose you, that loving you meant setting myself up for the worst pain imaginable. So I ran, just like I accused you of doing. So what's changed? Melissa asked, her voice still cold. Because I am going back to work. I'm not giving up being a cop. If that's a deal breaker for you, then we end this now. Nothing's changed about the danger, Daniel admitted. You're right. Being a cop is who you are. I can't ask you to give that up. But I realized something, thanks to Emma. He took a deep breath. Losing you because something happens is terrifying, but losing you because I pushed you away, that's a choice, and it's the wrong one. At least if I'm with you, loving you every day you're here, then whatever time we have is worth the risk. Melissa's armor began to crack, tears welling in her eyes. You really hurt me, Daniel. I know, and I'll spend however long it takes making it up to you if you'll let me. He pulled a small box from his pocket, his hands trembling. I bought this before the shooting. I was planning this whole elaborate proposal, but standing here now, I realize I don't need to elaborate. I just need you to know that I'm all in. Terrified, but all in. He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring. Melissa Travin, will you marry me? Will you let me spend every day proving that I'm brave enough to love you, no matter how scary it gets? Melissa stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. You're proposing now? After everything? I'm proposing because of everything, Daniel said. Because I almost lost you, and life's too short to waste time being afraid. Because Emma told me I was being an idiot, and she was right. Because I love you more than I fear losing you. For a long moment, Melissa didn't speak. Then, slowly, she extended her hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you absolute idiot. Yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injury. They stood in her doorway, holding each other, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. I'm still mad at you, Melissa murmured against his chest. I know. You should be. And we're going to need to talk about communication and trust and not running away when things get hard. Whatever it takes, Daniel promised. I'm not running anymore. Emma's delighted shriek when they told her the news could probably be heard 3 blocks away. The engagement wasn't without its complications. Jennifer's reaction was predictably volcanic. 3 days after Daniel and Melissa announced their engagement, Jennifer filed for full custody of Emma, citing Daniel's unstable relationship history and claiming that exposing their daughter to dangerous individuals made him an unfit parent. The legal papers arrived by courier, cold and clinical, designed to wound. The custody battle that followed was brutal. Jennifer's lawyer painted Melissa as a reckless adrenaline junkie who's been shot because of poor judgment. They brought up her broken engagement to Daniel a decade ago, suggesting she had a pattern of abandonment. They questioned whether a home with a police officer, someone who faced danger daily, was a safe environment for a child. Daniel watched Melissa sit through depositions where lawyers dissected every choice she'd made, every relationship she'd had, every moment of her past. He saw the toll it took on her, the way her shoulders tensed, the exhaustion that settled into her eyes. But Melissa never wavered. She never spoke ill of Jennifer in front of Emma, even when the accusations became personal and cruel. She encouraged Daniel to take the high road, to remember that Jennifer was acting from fear and loss, not malice. She's losing control of the narrative of her life. Melissa explained one night after a particularly brutal court session. She thought she found something better than what you two had, and it didn't work out. Now she's watching you build a happy family, and it's killing her. The compassion in Melissa's voice, even for someone actively trying to destroy their future, made Daniel love her even more. Emma, caught in the middle, struggled under the weight of adult problems. She became quiet at school, her grades slipping. Her teacher called to express concern. Daniel found her crying in her room one night, clutching a stuffed bear Melissa had won for her at a carnival. "I don't want to choose," Emma sobbed. "Why is Mom making me choose?" "You don't have to choose, sweetheart," Daniel promised, holding her close. "You're allowed to love both of us. This isn't about you. It's about the adults figuring things out." The court proceedings dragged on for 3 months. Testimonies from teachers, neighbors, Emma's pediatrician. A court-appointed psychologist interviewed Emma, asking careful questions about her home life, her relationships, her feelings. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, the courtroom was silent enough to hear breathing. "I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony," Judge Peterson said, her expression stern, "and I find no credible evidence that Mr. Mackenzie's home is unsafe or that Officer Travin poses any danger to the child. In fact, the evidence suggests quite the opposite, that Emma is thriving in a stable, loving environment." She looked directly at Jennifer. "Miss Chen, I understand that divorce and co-parenting are difficult, but weaponizing custody proceedings because you're unhappy with your ex-spouse's romantic choices is not in your daughter's best interest. The current custody arrangement will remain in place." Then the judge added something unexpected. "However, I'm ordering all parties to attend family counseling. Emma needs the adults in her life to learn how to coexist peacefully." Relief flooded through Daniel so intensely he had to grip the table to stay upright. Melissa squeezed his hand, her own eyes glistening with tears. The family counseling sessions were tense at first, everyone sitting in uncomfortable chairs in Dr. Morrison's office, avoiding eye contact. But gradually, something shifted. Jennifer began opening up about her own fears, the terror that she made irreversible mistakes, that Emma would forget her, that she lost her chance at the family she took for granted. "I see you three together," Jennifer admitted during one session, her voice breaking, "and I see what I threw away, what I could have had if I hadn't been so selfish and stupid." "You didn't throw Emma away," Melissa said gently. "She's still your daughter. That never changes. But I threw Daniel away, and I'm watching him be happy with you in a way he never was with me." The honesty was raw and painful, but necessary. Over weeks of sessions, they began to build something resembling peace. Jennifer started dating someone new, a kind elementary school teacher named Robert, who seemed to genuinely care about her. The softening in Jennifer's demeanor was gradual but noticeable. By the time spring arrived, the tension had eased enough for them to plan the wedding. They decided on something small and meaningful, Daniel's backyard, decorated with string lights and wildflowers. Melissa wore a simple white dress that made her look radiant. Daniel couldn't stop smiling, his face actually hurting from joy. Emma served as both flower girl and best daughter, a title she insisted on. She walked down the makeshift aisle ahead of Melissa, scattering rose petals with exaggerated seriousness, wearing a dress she picked out herself, purple, with sparkles, naturally. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising honesty, patience, and courage. When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma cheered so loudly that the small gathering of friends and family erupted in laughter. But the most meaningful moment came during the unity ceremony. Instead of the traditional candle lighting, they planned something different. Daniel, Melissa, and Emma each held a bottle of colored sand, blue for Daniel, gold for Melissa, purple for Emma. Together, they poured the sand into a single glass container, the colors swirling and mixing, creating something beautiful and inseparable. This represents our family, Daniel explained to the guests, his arm around both his wife and daughter. 3 individuals becoming one unit, stronger together than we ever were apart. Even Jennifer attended the wedding, sitting quietly at the back with Robert. After the ceremony, she approached the newlyweds with a stiff but genuine smile. "Congratulations," she said, the word sounding only slightly forced. "Emma looks happy." "Thank you for coming," Melissa replied sincerely. "It means a lot to her and to us." Jennifer nodded, then added in a lower voice, meeting Melissa's eyes, "Take care of them." "I will," Melissa promised, her voice steady and sure, always. The reception was a joyful chaos of dancing, laughter, and Emma showing off her new stepmom to anyone who would listen. Daniel watched Melissa twirl Emma around the makeshift dance floor, both of them giggling, and felt a peace he'd never known before. This was his family, his real, complete, messy, beautiful family. Before you watch the final part of this incredible journey, I need you to do something for me. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a second chance. Tag them in the comments. Tell them why this story made you think of them. Let's spread some hope today. The first year of marriage brought its own adventures and challenges. Melissa was promoted to detective, which meant longer hours but less street patrol, a compromise that eased Daniel's lingering fears without asking her to sacrifice her career. Daniel's construction company landed a major contract renovating the old courthouse, a project that gave him both professional pride and flexible hours to be home for Emma. They learned to navigate the complexities of blended family life. Melissa attended Emma's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines beside Daniel. Emma started calling Melissa M instead of her full name. Not Mom, which would have felt like a betrayal to Jennifer, but something uniquely theirs. Jennifer, for her part, found her own happiness with Robert. They got engaged on Emma's 10th birthday, and the girl was thrilled to be part of 2 families instead of caught between them. The adults managed civil conversations at school events, even occasionally sharing a laugh over Emma's latest dramatic pronouncements. But the greatest test of their rebuilt love came 2 years into the marriage when Melissa discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy hadn't been planned. Melissa was 34, focused on her career, and they agreed Emma was enough. But life had other plans. "I'm pregnant," Melissa told Daniel one morning, her voice shaking as she showed him the test. "I'm terrified and shocked, and I don't know how I feel about this." Daniel stared at the positive test, 1,000 emotions flooding through him. Then he pulled her into his arms. "We'll figure it out, together, like everything else." Telling Emma was nerve-wracking. They sat her down for a family meeting, and the 11-year-old's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like it hurt. "Would I still be special?" she asked, her voice small and vulnerable in a way that broke Daniel's heart. "You will always be special," Daniel assured her, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You're my first baby, my Emma Bean. Nothing, and I mean nothing, will ever change that." "And you'd be the best big sister in the world," Melissa added. "Any baby would be incredibly lucky to have you. Plus, you'd finally have someone to boss around besides us." Emma considered this, her face serious. "Okay," she finally said. "But I get to help pick the name and teach them all the important stuff." They laughed, relieved, not realizing the journey ahead would be harder than anticipated. The pregnancy was difficult. Melissa experienced severe morning sickness that lasted well into her 2nd trimester, leaving her exhausted and miserable. Then, in her 7th month, her blood pressure spiked dangerously high. The doctor ordered complete bed rest, a torture for someone as active as Melissa. Daniel rearranged his entire work schedule to be home, managing the household while trying not to hover over Melissa like an anxious mother hen. Emma stepped up in ways that stunned them both, bringing Melissa books and water, doing her homework quietly beside the bed, chattering about school drama to keep Melissa entertained. "You're amazing, you know that?" Melissa told Emma one afternoon, watching the girl organize her pill bottles by color. "I learned from the best," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "You and Dad never give up on stuff, so I won't either." Their son, Christopher, was born on a bright spring morning after a labor that terrified Daniel more than any moment in his life. When complications arose, the baby's heart rate dropping, Doctors rushing in with urgent voices, he stood frozen, helpless, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. But Melissa was strong, and Christopher was a fighter. After hours that felt like years, the baby's cry filled the delivery room, and Daniel collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Emma, who's been waiting in the hallway with Jennifer and Robert, was allowed in to meet her baby brother. She approached the hospital bed with reverent steps, staring at the tiny bundle in Melissa's arms. "He's so small," Emma whispered, gently touching Christopher's impossibly tiny hand. "His fingers are like little worms." "Gross but accurate," Melissa laughed, exhausted and radiant. "Can I hold him?" Daniel carefully transferred his son into his daughter's arms, showing her how to support the head. Emma looked down at Christopher with such fierce, protective love that Daniel had to turn away to hide his tears. "I'm your big sister," Emma told the baby seriously, "and I'm going to teach you everything. Well, everything important thing. Dad and Em can handle the boring stuff like math." 5 years after that rainy day on the highway, their family had found its rhythm. Melissa had returned to the police force part-time, balancing her career with family life in a way that worked for all of them. Daniel's construction business thrived, giving him the flexibility to be present for school events, soccer games, and late-night feedings. Emma had blossomed into a confident 16-year-old who split her time between her parents' houses without drama. She developed a special bond with Melissa. They had girls' nights where they did face masks and watched terrible reality TV, a tradition that was entirely their own. She doted on Christopher with a fierceness that sometimes bordered on bossy, but the little boy worshipped his big sister. Jennifer had married Robert and seemed genuinely happy. The four adults had learned to co-parent Emma with grace and cooperation, attending her basketball games together, splitting holidays without arguments, even occasionally sharing a laugh over coffee when coordinating schedules. One warm evening in late spring, Daniel and Melissa sat on that same porch swing, watching Emma teach 5-year-old Christopher how to catch fireflies in the yard. The little boy ran in circles, laughing with delight every time the insects lit up, while Emma patiently showed him how to cup his hands gently. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if your truck had just driven past me that day?" Melissa asked, leaning her head on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I couldn't have driven past. It's not who I am." "That's why I love you," she said simply. "Because you're the kind of man who stops to help, even in a storm, even when it's hard, even when it scares you. And I love you because you came back," Daniel replied. "Because you stayed, because you choose us every single day." As the fireflies danced around their children in the gathering dusk, Daniel reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. From heartbroken exes to a complete family. From a chance encounter in the rain to a love that felt both brand new and ancient. From fear and doubt to peace and certainty. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. Sometimes they're about rediscovering someone who was meant to be yours all along. About second chances given and taken. About courage to try again when every logical part of you screams to run. Sometimes the detours in life, the heartbreak, the mistakes, the painful lessons, lead us exactly where we were always meant to go. You just have to be brave enough to take the exit when it appears, even in the middle of a storm. Christopher's delighted squeal pierced the evening air as he finally caught a firefly, and Emma's proud cheer followed. Melissa squeezed Daniel's hand, and he squeezed back, both of them smiling in the darkness. This was home. This was love. This was worth every moment of pain it took to get here. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash that like button. Seriously, it helps more people find these stories of hope and second chances. Second, drop a comment telling me, do you believe people can truly change? Have you ever given someone a second chance? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your story. Third, subscribe to Soul Tales if you haven't already. We share real stories about love, redemption, courage, and the beautiful messiness of being human. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective on life. Remember, friends, kindness costs nothing, but can change everything. A simple act of stopping to help a stranger in the rain changed Daniel and Melissa's entire lives. What act of kindness can you do today? Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in second chances. Thank you for being part of the Soul Tales family. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep choosing courage, and keep your hearts open to the unexpected. See you in the next story.